Welcome back, ladies, gentlemen, and all else, NB viewers, what's up? You're all welcome here. Welcome back to another episode of 3 Random Creepypastas, episode 10 as a matter of fact. Aw yeah! That's right, we have officially reached 10 episodes of the show. I started this show back in the beginning of April, and we are now in the middle of September, and I think we've had some pretty good stories so far. It's been really interesting to see the show evolve. Let's take a look at 3 Random Creepypastas. Alright, here we go, 3 random creepypastas. Let's do it! Alright, our very first story is known as One Sick Kid, and it was added to the creepypasta wiki by a user known as Golly Gee, Have Some Tea! Back in 2015. Let's take a look and see what we find. And just so everyone's aware, the following story includes brief violence towards minors. It's quite disturbing. It doesn't go too much into detail, but just be warned just in case that is something that you do not want to hear about. Keep that in mind. One sick kid. That's all it takes. Vicky would start, usually with a sigh or an eye roll. One sick kid, and we're all infected. Everyone's coughing, sneezing, puking, whatever it may be, and it spreads. Ooh, this story is surprisingly topical. If the woman wasn't so annoyingly intimidating, one would argue with something along the lines of, well, you signed up for that when you decided to work in a public elementary school, but nobody ever did because Vicky was always right. Caitlin was 28 years, 3 months and 5 days old when she got called in for her first gig as a substitute for the kindergarten class at Walker Elementary. She hit it off immediately with the kindergarten class. Always the laid-back and artsy type, she kept the class entertained with a Bill Nye and a few construction paper projects from the back of a magazine. The normal teacher, Mrs. Treckett, was always calling out sick. Poor thing, the other teachers would whisper as they congregated during lunch breaks. 71 and still working here? No wonder she's always sick. But Caitlin never cared. She just loved little kids. Okay people, we need to talk. Vicky looked nervous, tapping her long fingernails on the desk in front of her as the other teachers sat in a circle of chairs. It was Thursday, after school meeting day. There's been a rather nasty bug reported, she said, obviously choosing her words carefully. I believe it would be very health conscious, both for us and the children, to maybe shut down the school for just a few days. The teachers groaned, all knowing that the more days they missed in the winter, the more would be added on to be made up before summer. I know, but, She trailed off. She looked concerned, Caitlin noticed. Miss Lee, the art teacher, was the first to speak against Vicky. Come on now, Vic, it's just a bug. We'll send the kids home the second they hit a degree higher than 98.8. All the other teachers, with the exception of Caitlin, nodded in agreement, with mutters of, sounds fair enough, and it'll be fine. Vicky stood, clipboard in hand, and gave an exacerbated sigh. You know what? Fine. But when you're all as sick as those poor kids at Chesterfield, don't come crying to me. And with that, she stormed out of the room, which had fallen silent. Jeez Louise, this story is surprisingly topical with everything going on in the world right now. That's pretty crazy. 10 minutes until the kids would be led inside from the playground and class would start, and Caitlin had still been too intimidated by Vicky's intensity to look up what had happened at Chesterfield. It was a particularly small middle school the next town over, and she was sure that at least some of the kids at Chesterfield would have siblings at Walker. Maybe Vicky was right. The bell rang and Caitlin jumped. She shut her laptop quickly, and as the children began trickling into the classroom, she decided to think nothing more on the matter. Abigail? Caitlin read the names from the clipboard, sipping her coffee occasionally. Toby? Here. Anna? Here. Maddie? There was no response. Maddie? She called out again, looking over the sea of children for the small blonde girl. I think she's tardy, piped up one child. Yeah, or absent, called out another. Could be sick, squeaked another. Okay, settle. If she isn't here by lunch, I'll have the office call her parents. Caitlin finished the coffee, really hoping Maddie would be in soon. She didn't want Vicky to be right. Miss Kate? She had gotten absorbed into a book a bit after nap time started, and hadn't even noticed Maddie entered the room. Oh, Maddie, good. I was just about to call your She was cut off by her own gasp as she set down the book and took a good look at the girl. Her skin was a sickly pale grey color, deep purple lines running like rivers under her skin from a deep scabbed gash on her shoulder. Her pale blonde hair looked stringy, and her eyes were yellow with sickness. Oh my, Maddie! She really had no clue what to say. "I'm sick," said the young girl quietly, tugging at the corner of her dark green dress. "My mommy and daddy said I had to come to school." Caitlin was scared and confused, but the state of the girl weakened her heart. She forced a comforting smile, patting the girl on the head. "Why don't you go lay down on a mat? I'll get the nurse in a little bit." She knew very well that the nurse was busy in the 5th grade wing, dealing with a girl who had fallen off the auditorium stage, but she wanted to make it seem like she knew what to do, for the sake of both her and Maddie. The young girl nodded and went to lay down, leaving Caitlin feeling chilled. An hour passed. Maddie spent most of that time sleeping. Caitlin couldn't bring herself to wake her, and finally Caitlin decided to go get the nurse. She asked the teacher next door, Miss White, to watch over the children for a moment. As she made her way down the hall to the office, she felt uneasy. Something was wrong with Maddie, and it was even worse than Vicky had let on. The office called the nurse, who didn't pick up, and then Maddie's parents, who also didn't pick up. Caitlin walked back to the class as slowly as possible and opened the door hesitantly. It was chaos. Blood slicked the floor in randomly strewn puddles. 2 or 3 bodies, including Mrs. White's, sat in ghastly condition. One girl had pencils and scissors sticking out from her chest, while a boy's head had been stuck in the play oven, his body propped up in a chair. The rest of the children, attacking each other mercilessly, seemed to have taken on these symptoms Maddie had shown. Sickly skin, yellow eyes, and those ghastly purple lines spreading out from oozing gashes. It took Caitlin little time to realize what the gashes were. Deep bite wounds. She shrieked as a child jumped on her. More followed, but after the first she lost count. She couldn't do anything except scream bloody murder as she fell to the ground, her skull making a cracking noise as it hit the hard floor. Her vision blurred and she tasted blood in her mouth. She heard the clicking of heels and what sounded like a gun. Before her last thoughts, along with a good portion of her brain matter, slipped from her head, she saw a familiar woman, her face stoic and her pantsuit stained with blood. One sick kid. That's all it takes. Alright, that was pretty intense of a story. Not too long, but I think it did pretty well with what it had. The writing was strong, the characterizations, while brief, were pretty good, and I thought that overall I did enjoy it. It was pretty disturbing, having all these kindergarten children all, fighting to the death or whatever, but I think the story handled it pretty well. Maybe you have a different opinion regarding that, but I personally thought that the story was pretty good. I enjoyed that story, and I found it to be quite disturbing and pretty well written, so overall I will give that story a 7, bordering on an 8 out of 10. I certainly hope you enjoyed it as well, and I think the author did a pretty good job with it. I think the more serious subjects were there to showcase that, you need to be careful with sick kids or with sick people in general so that they don't infect others, especially with what is going on right now. But yeah, that's basically all I have for this story, and let's move on to story number 2. Let's find one. Alright, our second story is known as Compliance, and it was written by an author known as Gabe McKeldry. Let's take a look. I had just returned to my hometown after being overseas for a few years. I was stationed in the Middle East as a Marine, and I was now off duty, so I was able to get settled back home and I could catch up with everyone in the area. The first place I went to was the old pharmacy where one of my friends used to work. It had been a while since I last saw him, and I was wondering if he even still worked there. After passing much of the area, I noticed that most of the town didn't look at all how I left it. It used to be very poverty-stricken, so most of the buildings and roads looked decayed. But now I could see that they had either remodeled or replaced the buildings, and the roads had been paved over. Crime used to be a major problem in the past, but now I wondered if they had cleaned the place up, since the town looked so much better. Once I got to the pharmacy, I went up to the front counter and looked across to see if I could find my old friend Roger. I noticed he was over towards the back of the building, handling some medicine on the shelves. For some reason, he had a very excited demeanor, and I wondered what the deal was. He hadn't noticed me yet, so I tried to get his attention. "Hey, Roger!" He turned around and noticed me, still wearing that same bright look of his, and then he approached the counter. Hey, John, you're back! So, does that mean you're off duty for a while? That's right. The conversation went on for a few minutes as we talked about how our lives were going. Then I hinted that I was going to do some errands, but I had to ask him a question first. He had been smiling the entire time, even before he saw me, so he had my curiosity piqued. Hey, so why are you so happy all of a sudden? Happy? What do you mean? You've been glowing the entire time. Oh, I guess it was just the fact that I got those vaccines recently. Two stories that are topical regarding the current situation, huh? That was a very strange response, and I had expected entirely different answers. I figured that he would just say that he got a new girlfriend or a promotion or something like that, not the fact that he enjoyed getting shots of fluid jabbed into his arm. Must be some really good vaccines then, I said with an awkward laugh. Hey, before you leave, have you gotten your vaccines taken care of? He pointed in the direction across from us. I noticed that there was a sign that read, "Get your vaccines here," and there were a few other employees working behind the counter. Oddly enough, they were all smiling as they worked. They weren't talking to each other or laughing at anything, so I couldn't understand why they looked like that. It was very unnerving and I wanted to leave pretty quickly. Yeah, I got all that taken care of a long time ago, I responded. Well, I guess I'll be heading on my way. We said our pleasantries and I left to go do my errands. But everywhere I went, everyone was acting the same way as Roger and those pharmacy employees. No matter what they were doing or where they were, they always had that over-the-top cheerful look about them. So after running a few errands, I decided to return home and try to relax a little. I hadn't completed all of my tasks yet, but the day's disturbing events had made me question if I should even bother. I spent the rest of the day reading and watching TV before heading to bed later that night. I probably slept for a good several hours before being woken up by my phone ringing on the side of the bed. I rolled over onto my side and hastily looked at the clock. It was 2 in the morning and I hadn't expected to get any calls so late, if at all. I reached over and answered it. Hello? Oh, thank God this number actually works and you're home this time. Hey, I know it's really late, but there's something you need to know about the vaccines in that town. What are you talking about? Who is this? My name's Jesse. We just met before you left for the military. I don't know if you remember me, but that's not important right now. He was right. I didn't remember him very well at all, and that only made this phone call even more unusual. You need to get out of that town as quickly as possible. I've kept an eye on the residents, and I know what they're going to do. They've already done it to the rest of the folks living there. What? Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but you must have seen them after you returned, right? The way they were always smiling at you, the way they acted. That is when it struck me hard, and I could feel my stomach drop. You mean how bubbly they were? Yes, that's right. So you know what I'm talking about. Look, man, I've got to go before they find me too, but trust me when I say, you've got to get out of there soon. He hung up the phone after saying that, and I just sat there on my bed. I wasn't sure how to take everything in, and I questioned whether it was all true or not. It even occurred to me that maybe I just hallucinated the majority of the past day, due to what happened overseas, but everything felt too real for that to be the case. Then I remembered the way Roger responded after asking him why he was so happy, and that only solidified my worries. That's when I decided to get ready to leave and stay out of town, at least temporarily. But those plans were suddenly interrupted by the sounds of loud banging from outside. It sounded as if it was coming from all around the house downstairs. The walls, windows, and doors were being pushed against, and there was no sign of it stopping. I rushed over to my bedroom window and looked outside, down at my front yard. There, surrounding my house, was a large crowd of people pushing forcefully towards my home. They looked like the town's residents, and they all had the same demeanor. That smiling eeriness I first saw when I walked into the pharmacy. That's when I knew I needed to get the hell out of there, without a moment's hesitation. I rushed downstairs, grabbed my car keys and a knife from the kitchen, and went to the garage. I got into my car and I took a moment to prepare myself for what I would have to face. I opened my garage and dozens of them poured in, trying desperately to reach for the driver door. Their attempts were only met with disappointment as I backed out into the driveway and turned the wheel. Several of them pushed their way towards my car as I started to turn towards the street. I could see their faces as they knocked and pushed against the window, but it was no use. They couldn't get to me in time, and I was able to turn into the street. I floored it and drove as quickly as I could, out of town. After that, I called the police and I stayed away from that place. I later found out that the town had to be closed off and evacuated. All of the citizens were hostile, and so the police had to use force to get things under control. Some of the citizens died in the incident, but those who survived had to be taken to the hospital to get checked out. Apparently, all of them had some strange drug flowing through their system. Nobody knew exactly what it was called, or even where it came from. But I think that's what Roger was talking about in regard to the vaccines. Anyways, I haven't returned to that area since, and I'm always very careful when I go to get any vaccines. Alright, so that was Compliance. The ending was maybe a little bit abrupt. Overall, I felt like the writing was solid, the story was solid, and I enjoyed the main character. And I found that when, the house was surrounded and the author was, or the main character was, escaping, it was quite intense, and I wanted to know what was going to happen next. Like I said, it ended a little abruptly, and maybe I would have liked a little more. But overall, I found that story to be quite enjoyable and interesting, so, yeah. I don't have a lot of negative to say about it, other than that. So overall, I would probably give that like a 6 out of 10 or something like that. I did enjoy it, and I think the author did a pretty good job. So overall, good story. With that said, let's finally move on to our third and final story. Let's go. Alright, our third and final story is known as Journey, and it was added to the Creepypasta wiki by a user known as Your Loss, all the way back in 2014. Let's finish off the video by reading Journey. Let's go. With a start, I woke up in the bedroom of my house. Sort of. I was in my bed, and it was my house, but different. My bedroom walls and rug were pale blue, as they have always been. My bed sheets were white, as always, but freshly washed. The comforter covering me, however, was a lovely new pastel in my favorite color. The curtains were different also, and the few childhood things I'd kept on shelves in my room were missing, as were the shelves. Looking around my room, I noticed the rest of the furniture was the same, but looked haphazardly refurbished. Although my bedroom furniture was old, my parents always said that it was good quality, so even though I didn't like it, I just had to live with it. I realized my parents had probably decided to surprise me by slapping a new coat of paint on the dressers while I slept. I'm an incredibly deep sleeper, so they could have easily moved the furniture out of the room and put it back without me hearing a thing. Typically, they put the stuff back in the wrong places, but oh well. Their hearts were in the right place, I guess. Now that I was fully awake, I was surprised to notice there were a few new things. A trophy for gymnastics, a neatly pressed cheerleading outfit, and a new laptop. I'd never been athletic in the slightest. Clumsiness kind of ran in the family. And my parents kept refusing to buy me a laptop until my old desktop computer completely died, which it refused to do. That thing seemed frustratingly immortal. It was obvious, of course, that my parents had decided to surprise me by halfway remodeling my room during the night while I was sleeping. Why, though, had they added some items that didn't seem to belong at all? That cheerleading outfit, for instance. It must have been placed there as some sort of not-so-subtle hint. Cheerleading had been the only sport my mom had ever excelled at, and she had really enjoyed it when she was in high school. She wrongly thought that I might like it too. It seemed like every other week she was saying, "Lisa, you should really try out for the team. You might really like it." And I always said, "I'll think about it." You know the way you do when you know you're never going to think about it, but it gets your mom off your back for a little while. The laptop computer, however, did make sense. My desktop had been moving at a snail's pace for quite some time, making it impossible to do schoolwork on it effectively. I was always asking to borrow their computers, and it was probably starting to annoy them. The big puzzler, though, was the gymnastics trophy. It was big, and it was engraved with the words, "First Place," and my name. Believe me, I'm no gymnast. I can't even do a somersault. I went to my closet to get dressed so I could go downstairs to ask about the trophy and thank my parents for the other stuff. When I opened the closet door, I screamed in delight. I had a whole new wardrobe, with some clothes I was almost sure I'd never seen anyone else at my school wearing. I never owned the new spring line when it came to fashion. I was used to having to make do with something more like the more affordable 5 years ago line. Had we won the lottery or something and no one had told me? Now I was beyond excited, and ran to the door so I could hug my parents. Yes, I was that happy. When I opened my bedroom door, something caused me to pause. At first I couldn't place the reason why I'd stopped, but then it hit me. My door didn't creak when it opened like usual. My parents had refused to oil the hinges, the reasoning being that they would be able to hear me open the door in the event I got it in my mind to sneak out at night. Optimism at its best, I guess. Hardly anyone invited me to go anywhere during the day, let alone at night. It isn't that I am unpopular, I'm just a normal plain girl who's also pretty shy. For some reason, the old door hinges unsettled me a little. I mean, they didn't smell like they had been recently oiled, but I decided I was being silly and started to go downstairs. On the way down, I was thinking the whole place could probably use a paint job and some new carpeting. It just never seemed to be in my parents' budget. When I got downstairs, I stopped dead in my tracks. All the wall colors and carpeting were the same, but things that could easily be changed, like furniture and curtains, were different. I also noticed 2 pairs of dressy shoes, set neatly by the front door. They looked new and expensive. My parents never wore shoes like that, unless they were going to a funeral or something. My dad owns a construction business, and I have a stay-at-home mom. No need to dress up for those jobs. Okay, this is really interesting so far. I'm wondering where this story is going. I'm enjoying sort of the playful way the story is written so far, and I hope the story can wrap things up neatly. I was starting to get a funny feeling, but thankfully I heard my parents' bedroom door open. However, they didn't come downstairs. One of them tapped lightly on my bedroom door and then went back into their own bedroom. Now that I was sure that they were awake, I went back upstairs to get some answers. How could we afford all this stuff, and how had they gotten it all placed overnight? My initial excitement was completely gone. Now I only felt extremely unsettled. Before I got to my parents' room, I noticed my bedroom door was slightly ajar. When I went to close it, I noticed a note on my bed. It read, "Remember to wear your uniform. It's a game day. Love you." What in the hell was she talking about? Academia had always been my thing. I'd never cared about a sporting event in my life. I went across the hall and tentatively knocked on my parents' door. A woman answered the door, but she was definitely not my mom. She was beautifully made up and dressed in a business suit, sans shoes. I couldn't believe it. On top of everything else, my dad was having an affair? The woman smiled and said, "Honey, it's late. You really need to get ready for school." Who was this bitch to tell me what to do? And where was my mom? I entered the room to confront my dad, but he was in their master bathroom finishing up his shower. I angrily pounded on the door. My dad yelled back, "Just a minute." While I waited, I glowered at the other woman while she stupidly asked me what was wrong. I didn't even bother to answer her. It took only a minute for the bathroom door to open. A man modestly wrapped in an oversized towel stepped out, but it was definitely not my dad. He looked at me kindly and said, "What's up, sweetheart?" There are no words to describe the terror I felt at that moment. My body went cold and I froze in place, but just for a moment. I bolted for the door to go get help, not that I even knew where I was going to run. But the man moved too quickly. He grabbed me before I even reached the door and held me in his arms. In a panicky voice, he asked me over and over what was wrong. In my struggle to break free, I caught a glimpse of myself in the oversized mirror through the now wide-open bathroom door. The girl looking back was me, but not me. It was her eyes. They were looking almost through me, into my soul. At this point, nothing could hold me. I ran downstairs and out of the front door of my house and started to dash across the street, still not sure where I was going. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the school bus approaching, but not in time to get out of the way. And then, everything went black. I woke up with a start in my bed, remembering my unsettling dream. Okay. I settled down in my familiar bed, in my familiar room lined with all the sports trophies I'd won over the years. I tried to get a few minutes more of shut-eye, but my mom walked in, looking so cute in the clothes she wore to the gym every morning. My dad was behind her, already in his policeman's uniform. They reminded me to hurry downstairs for breakfast. I had a soccer game after school and had to be well-fueled so our team could continue our winning streak. I stretched and got out of bed, trying to plan what I was going to wear to the big party after the game. You know, I thought to myself, I really love my life. And that right there was Journey, the final story of the 10th episode of 3 Random Creepypastas. Yeah, I thought that was really good of a story. It kept you guessing all throughout. It was really weird, you know? You were wondering what the hell was going on all throughout it. Some might say that it was all a dream ending is a bit of a cop-out. Could be seen that way, but personally I don't really mind it that much because I found myself really enjoying the ending of the story, you know, the final paragraph where the author talked about, you know, how much they love their life, how grateful they are about everything. I thought that was like a sweet little way to bookend the story because every horror story, doesn't need like a sad or depressing ending. Unless, of course, I am missing something and there's like something implying that it's like a false security ending or something like that, if you know what I mean. But I don't think so. I thought that was a really, really solid story. I really enjoyed it. There's very little that I can say that I personally think was like negative. It was as brief as it needed to be. It offered just enough there for you to keep guessing and for you to wonder what was going on. Overall, I thought that was really good and like intriguing, and I wanted to know what the hell was going on. And at first, it was disturbing to see you or see the author horrified to see these people that were not their parents. They're acting strangely towards them, and quite rightly panicking because of that, and then figuring out that it was all a dream, and for them to really figure out that they appreciate the life that they have. Yeah, I found that to be a really solid, fun, interesting story. So overall, that was probably like a 7, probably even an 8 out of 10. I enjoyed that, and I hope you did too, and I hope you enjoyed the 3 stories that we read. With that said, that should be all for the 3rd story. And there you finally have it. Those were 3 random creepypastas. Thank you so much for listening and for sticking with me through these 10 episodes, and here's to many more in the future. With that said, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and comment your thoughts down below. Check out my social medias if you want to, or my Patreon page if you want to support the channel directly. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay awesome. Goodbye.